Hello and welcome to Seinu Gardens. Today I'm going to be talking about field growing trees. This is going to be a multi-part series. In this episode I'm going to talk about the pot in the ground, or the pot accurately on the ground technique. And one of the first things is that, as you can see in this tree, I'll get you a close-up, but this tree is actually outgrown this pot significantly, which is part of why we have some dead growth on it. So, I mean, it's not really doing as good as it could if it was dug up out of the ground and planted in a big pot, much bigger than this one. So, and the issue of digging it up, this tree is a red maple, a native red maple, Acer rubrum. But the issue with growing trees like this, that grow massive and normal, versus say a dwarf tree like the Seinu Chinese elm, is that with something like this large material, it's going to quickly outgrow the pot. And if you're using this method, growing a tree like this in the ground, it's going to have issues long term, both in root base development, because I have two other trees that did not develop a good root base. This one kind of did. And the issue is because they were trapped in a pot and could not spread out the roots like they normally would planted directly in the ground. This method is more suitable towards smaller dwarf trees. A Japanese maple might work good with this method, especially a dwarf Japanese maple or a dwarf Chinese elm. But the full-size tree is not really suitable. I'm not sure about like an actual Japanese maple, because they are generally much smaller than a red maple. But a Japanese maple might work with this method. But with this, you really have a hard time dealing with them in such a small pot, especially with the root base, which I'll get you a close-up of in a moment. But they outgrow their pot so quickly that it's not very good for developing a quality root base. It's not a good system for larger trees. For dwarf trees, they do grow out, but they don't really develop such a massive trunk, because this trunk is only about 5 years in the making, which is not very long. A dwarf tree is going to take a much longer time to develop this kind of trunk, and because of that, it can actually stay in this pot and not have any issues outgrowing the pot, like this red maple can. That's kind of one of the major issues with what I've had with the three maples that I grew in the ground for the past 5 years. And another thing that I had, an issue that I had, and this is an issue with the in-ground method with pots, which is where the pot is buried in the ground completely, is that when you come to dig it up, you have all of this, which is way down deep in the ground, growing very strongly. All of these massive roots. It becomes extremely difficult to dig up and handle compared to the on-ground method. When you use the on-ground method, there's a few different ways you can do it. But the one thing to note of is, while they still grow out of the drainage holes, they generally can be just like, you have the pot here, take your saw, cut it right here, and it's a very simple process of getting it out of the ground, and you don't need to do a lot of digging, a lot of getting to the roots. It's much easier to handle. So what I know about the roots growing out of into the ground with a pot on the ground method is you can also bury the pot a few inches, which gives, or instead of that, you can also put mulch over the drainage holes, which will encourage roots to grow out quicker. But what this happens is it allows you to get a good start much earlier with the roots in the ground to allow it to start growing and getting that field grown strength and with a massive root system that really boosts growth a lot. And that's one of the things I would recommend, is either burying the pot a few inches about right here above the drainage holes, just to let the roots have that moisture, have that good soil, give it that space to just go crazy. But you also get the benefits of on the ground, where it's much easier to prune off the roots, because you're not digging down deep into the ground trying to dig up this entire root system, which is I had a lot more trouble than I thought I would with these red maples. I thought I was just gonna dig up a little bit of dirt, cut off the roots, and it'd be done. But no, it's actually a very, very difficult, annoying process. I did get them up all three pretty easily because they were in the pots. With the pot method, it does make it a lot easier than putting a tree in the ground for 5 years with no restrictions. So it is easier in that respect, because you can just chop them next to the pot. But it's still very difficult if this root system is very deeply in the ground. It's much more involved than the technique of using it on the ground or buried just barely under the ground to encourage quicker rootage earlier on. So that's kind of like the main technique. It's kind of like burying it in the ground just a little bit to give those roots the room they need, the soil they need, and the moisture they need to really take off really quickly, and kind of like get started and really get growing. And it really also gives the benefits of being on the ground, like I said, and being able to just like dig them up very quickly, very easily. You don't even have to really do any digging. You can just, especially with the mulch method, brush away the mulch, take your saw, cut the roots, and you're pretty much done. So that is the easiest method, is the pot on ground with mulch over the roots, the drainage holes, to allow it to like grow and have the moisture. That's like the easiest method, because you can just rake away the mulch, cut the roots. It really makes the process super easy, super simple. Don't have to worry about digging. You don't have to worry about a lot of issues. So the process is pretty easy to handle and deal with. Anyways, I'll see you right back, and I'll give you a closer look of the maple's fruit base, as well as my other maples, and I'll be talking a bit about the drawbacks, especially of larger growing trees like the red maple versus dwarf trees, and issues you can deal with on the root base.